city, and it was just too much because Simon is one of these girls who enjoy the company of men, loves new surroundings, new community, and new potential.
She was a girl that wanted to have fun.
Yeah, so she was a girl that wanted to have fun, and she did. So I would never do that to her again, but it was a marvelous kind of process, and I was just thankful that so many of the members of NA picked up on recognizing him and paying tribute to him along the way, and so it was because people had heard about him, and we had shared the information about him at NA conventions and other times, and in fact he eventually spoke at one of the conventions.
93 or Washington, 94.
Yeah.
He made another trip
Right.
in. Did you maintain contact with him throughout his life afterwards?
Yeah, but throughout the time when I wrote to Simon when he was in prison till his death, I was in contact with him.
Now I'm going to reestablish a timeline because this has been so interesting. The New York Convention took place in 1986.
Yeah.
And of course it was regarded as quite different from previous conventions because of the significant multicultural, multi-ethnic components that were part of that convention as opposed to black and white only at most of the previous conventions. What was your role in that convention?
Mitchell Carver and I were co-chairs of the convention, and we specifically attempted to challenge the organization around the potential for looking at a multicultural world. And so we did what we had done with the local chapter. We invited speakers, mainly women. I remember Patricia Robertson being one of our keynote speakers, Barbara Smith being another speaker, and that was reflected by the fact that early on we had people like Adrian Lord who spoke at the Adrian Rich, I'm sorry, who spoke at a previous convention, and as I said before, I think I mentioned early on, and maybe not as concrete as I like to now, is that lesbian, in particular lesbian of color, has always been, besides Baldwin, I would say, if we look at one writer, and maybe later on Essex Hemphill, who we used in terms of a connection for having a foundation for our political process and what we were doing, and hopefully having people understand that. So the conference, we felt in New York, since we had brought it to New York, that we really need to do something different for the NA and to share what we were learning and what we hope to be the future of the group. And so that's what we attempted to do. Out of that, though, for us, it was the first time we did a boat ride, and it became an annual event now. Yeah. The Tuesday before Pride Day is now, the annual boat ride that we have, which is a fundraiser for the group and the major fundraiser. And last year it was wonderful. We had almost 200 people on our boat ride, so that was really great.
Now, what stands out in your mind as to the most memorable event of the convention?
In New York?
Yes.
What stands out for me was my taking responsibility not only for co-chairing the convention, but catering. What stands out for other people may not be this, but catering the event at what's the name of the place where we had offered people to stay.
Oh, at Columbia University?
Yeah,
Union Theological
Seminary, and I took responsibility for catering that out on the lawn event. So that's what stands out for me, how stupid I was to try to do all of those things and add this to a heavy agenda that I already had. Well, but it worked out well. But you asked me that for a reason, so you have to.
You're quite well known for your culinary skills, and I hear that you actually catered a lot of events for the chapter.
I still do once in a while. I should say a lot of events. But one of the annual events that I do is Sabu, which is a Soulful Awakening for Black Unity, which is a celebration of Black History Month, or African and African American History Month. And I do it as a donation to the group, so that we have speakers, and in fact Simon was one of our speakers. He happened to be here, but we were able to do that once. And we have music, and members contribute their talents, and I provide a meal, which is part of the tradition.
So you know the art of cooking for 100 or 150 people?
Well, since I've started a group called, I started PAC in New Jersey, People of All Colors Together in New Jersey, and out of that we had a project called Project Fire, and we had the Fireball, and at the Fireball we have 1,000 people, so I do the catering for that.
Yes, in fact, I put an ad up in my home in Washington, D.C. in the lobby to let people know when I got it.
Great.
James, I did want to ask you one more question about the convention in New York. Did you have any disappointments during that convention, or was there anything that didn't quite accomplish what you had hoped?
I think for the most part, we had people to speak to some of the issues that we think, and challenge the group around thinking around these kinds of issues. I did, at that convention, was that the election process where I was elected co-chair?
Yes, yes.
I'm trying to remember, because it's like you get elected, but then you don't serve until, okay. And so that was one thing, and it was kind of interesting because I really didn't intend to run until Gavin Morrow Hall sort of, I don't know if people, well, you know Gavin's role. You probably did it to you too. Gavin has been one of those unsung heroes of the organization, because he sort of had this sense for personalities at work. And so he gets on the phone and sort of manipulates and encourage and massage and make sure not only that you run, but you win. So we've had some, I think, outstanding leadership, because he's played a role in making sure not only that certain people get into certain prominent positions within the association, but others become part of the board so that they can get some skills to move up to that. So I think Gavin is an unsung hero in a lot of ways for the group, and it might be wonderful if they think about doing something about that now that I think about it, in terms of recognizing people who contributed, because that's sort of behind the scene. No one will know that unless someone tells, and you and I know, and I'm sure a lot of other people who've been elected over the years know what a role that he played in getting them even interested in being a part of the National Association, and particularly running for the board. Like, the last thing on your mind is commitment, not only your time and energy, but your dollar bill too.
That's right.
And he's massaged and manipulated and promised. I don't know how many promises he didn't keep, but I think it's done well by the organization, because I think he's done it in the interest of the organization, not necessarily for himself. So.
Well, this allows us to segue into the 2 years that you were co-chair of this organization. And they were very important years, because that's when the task force was getting underway, or at least a lot of the work, when the name change issue was debated. As you look back on the 2 years that you were co-chair, James, what do you think was your greatest accomplishment during that time?
Actually, I think it was getting the group involved in a prominent way with the 1987 March on Washington.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
I think that was, the group had never really been perceived as an entity that people call on for things in that way. I think I shouldn't say never, but it was significant in the sense that this was the second major call for a march to for lesbian and gay rights, and it needed a connectedness that has never happened before, because at that time it was emerging groups, and there was a fight on the board, and it ended up of the people who came together to do the march that even one of the most painful experience that I had in that whole 2-year period was going to LA and being a part of the discussion of the board, and literally walking out of the room crying because people made it clear that their agenda would not be changed because they had the money and they had the power, and that people of color, the issues that we were dealing with was not the priority that they had. And so what happened with that was that we had a separate ceremony at one location where the people of color had an opportunity to show themselves and others what they would have liked to be a part of the march, and then later on to participate in the march. And so that became the dynamic that people have grew to understand do happen in the political arena of the lesbian and gay world, is that there are different interests, and one is the I don't know how it is characterized, but civil rights of gays versus human rights for all. Mm-hmm. And I think that that is a summary of the dichotomy that exists, that people of color are seeking human rights for all, and many of the entities, even now in the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender community ruled by Caucasians, are seeking civil rights for all, and are for themselves. And that's a different kind of politics, and that's why you'll find that the people of color entities tend to hook up with people of color coalitions within their communities and nationally, where the civil rights groups, gay groups, tend to stay within their own and very seldom venture out beyond the civil rights issues as it pertains to lesbian and gay people. And that shortchanged the process as far as I'm concerned. And so if you ask me what was my greatest accomplishment, I think it was, well,
you can name more than one, James. You can name more than one.
Okay. I think more importantly was actually the initiation of the National Task Force on AIDS Prevention. It had to be, because it was our national response to the AIDS crisis facing our community. And this was a secondary kind of thing. And I guess get away from pain, but both situation was painful. I was trying to remember why would I think that instead the march, I guess, because I love marches and I love that whole process, because it can be a freeing expression for so many people, and yet HIV/AIDS is so devastating that we needed the assistance to get people to stay alive so they could march or do other things.
Were you affected as a co-chair by Tom Horan's knowledge during that period that he was HIV positive, because I believe it affected his morale at that time? Do you remember?
Oh yeah, Tom was very down and very upset, and it was very challenging to know what to do and how to support him. And of course, being the distance thing didn't help. Right. And Tom, in some way, secluded himself, and it was difficult. Although I got a relationship with his sister that helped a lot, particularly toward the end. I was able to call her and talk with her and keep in touch to know what was going on. And afterwards, we did maintain contact. In fact, one of the things that I'm concerned about, I may have lost her. I lost my address book, and I may have lost her address. So I know she lived in Carolina. That was the other connection. So that was also fun to be able to talk to her.
Now, it seems that after maybe 1990, 1991, your participation and presence at national conventions became more limited. Did you pull back from the organization? And
Well, it coincided with my pulling back from MACT New York. In 1991, I started a group at PACT, People of All Colors in New Jersey. And again, it has to do with talking the talk, walking the walk. We did not officiate and haven't officially affiliated with the national because we are a multi-cultural, multi-ethnic group, and to have us belong to the National Association of Black and White Men together don't work. So we have been a very small group intentionally. We haven't expanded a lot, although people constantly call. In fact, I got a call before I left, interested in the group, and we do send information out. One of the things that we need, and one thing that we're working on, is a space. I use the Rutgers University space and use the Rutgers University allowance of me to connect with community interests and community as the Dean of Multicultural Affairs to do work with the community. And so this is one of the projects that I use to connect with the Gala group on campus. And so my work with PACT, my work with HIV/AIDS in New Jersey with Project FIRE, first of all, and then Project FIRE 2 for a while. I was full-time at Rutgers and full-time at Project FIRE, and it just became too much. I just had to make some choices, and my choice was that I couldn't do Friday nights in New York anymore, that I couldn't do connection with the national. I could come perhaps and support by giving some of my dollars when I could, but come to the conventions and keep in touch through some other resources. But the main reason is that national, for the most part, I think, demands that you, if there's a local group, that you maintain contact with it. And I haven't been that involved with New York. I do go there once in a while, and now Mitchell and I are planning to do some work with MACT New York around the discussion of diversity and providing a way for MACT to use our skills in combination with the larger community to have a real dialogue in New York at this time around race during the fall of next year and in the spring of next year to do one around gender issues. So we have maintained connection, and as you know, we worked also on the current diversity project with Paul. We went out to California, met with them, and so there are things that I can do that don't require a lot of my consistent time, and that's what we're talking about. The interests of the organization and where it's going, I always support, but in terms of being there consistently to do work, I just simply can't. And plus, I got a new boss at Rutgers, and he's working everything that he can on me. But he's not working the black off, as you can see. He's still there.
I'd like to ask you, in the vast scope of your involvement from 1979 to 1999, how has the organization changed since it started, in your opinion? And I know that's a big question.
Well, I think there's the most dynamic change that has happened is the result of loss. I think when you lose powerful people, you lose all that they could bring to making the association grow and change and develop, because they are growing and changing and developing at the same time. And I think that it it's easier to replace powerful people in the white community, but it's not as easy as the people of color community. In the sense of a socio-political dynamic that I think moves the organization. If there is one thing that's missing, I think it's that socio-political dynamic, because we used to fight, and now everything is cool, but people don't understand the fighting is about. Fighting is a good thing for the most part if it's about changing what currently exists. And I think for the most part, despite all of the fighting that we were doing, we all knew that the ultimate objective was to change the current status of where we're at. But I think the more the group has gotten a sense of control of things like finances, and I think that plays a role too. When you have less resources in terms of what you want to do, there tend to be more fights. But I think the group on the one hand has gotten itself in a more position, although it may not think so, financially there's less fighting going on. But I don't think that's necessarily good for the organization in the sense of the growth and development and change that's possible, because the issues are still there. The issues still haven't changed. The issues just taking on a more, I want to say attractive, but that's not the word I'm looking for. It's an illusion kind of thing, you know, that I think that people think that things are better and want to believe that the perception of better and all of that. But it's the illusion of being better in America that fucks up folks, you know. Because we're better off monetarily, we think that everything else is better off. But that's not necessarily true. I mean, racial profiling has been going on for years, and suddenly we just discovered it. Please, you know, please. And as I suggested at a meeting yesterday, and I will suggest again, and I think the board should do this. I don't know if you guys are intimately involved with the board, but you guys should get a copy of the Chris Rock video and play it as the board and take segments of it and have a discussion around some of the issues that he raised and the irony of some of his stuff. He's a satirist, and there is food there for a really debate and discussion on relevant issues that affect us as gay men of color, or gay men in particular.
You know, the first few years of the organization, to me, the strength of it was the confrontation and the catharsis of getting it out. And as a white member, I found it to be a tremendous educational experience, because you were hitting me over the head with a sledgehammer, but I was learning. And so were many of us at that time, because what's unspoken becomes unlearned.
Right.
One of the great confrontations that occurred back in '85, do you remember when the Atlanta chapter displayed the Confederate flag, James?
Oh, please. That was if that was a downtime in America, it was that day. That evening, it was supposed to be a reception. And it wasn't so bad that the flag were displayed, but we learned later that the white members said, or the Caucasian European American members said, no, y'all shouldn't do this. And the black men, people of color say, oh, we're going to do this. That became even more of a slap in the face.
Did that blow your mind?
Oh, it blew my mind.
Did you talk to them as one black member to another? Did that hurt you?
Yeah, we tried to talk about it at the Black Caucus as well, and there were a lot of resistance to it, in the sense that not necessarily resistance, but the demand that this is our choice, and we were making it, and the ideal and notion that still permeates the group in a lot of ways is that you use a symbol or an icon and you use it in your way and you take out the power that it is. That's bullshit. You know, I mean, a lot of folks have that belief, but that's bullshit. You know, the power in something is through the use of the folks who believe in that. And the Confederate flag continues to be used because a lot of folks think that the South should not have lost that war, and that right now we're paying the devastation of that through what's going on in the community, in the sense that people of color are taking over the world, you know, taking over America, okay? You know, and it has significant ramifications, you know, when you look at the religious wrong and how what they're doing, you know, and how they have usurped the Republican Party, and the Democrats haven't found a way to counteract it, and they're putting themselves in position in the school boards and local communities and, you know, local political positions, and now they're getting ready to elect another Bush. Lord, what's going to happen to the world? And and it's not so much in terms of people thinking about what they will do now, but it's the future. It's the Supreme Court. It's all of those entities in America that are going to be challenged around this coming change that's happening. And what I see it as is that we keep hearing people say, well, in 2020 that the Latinos are going to be in power in terms of numbers. Ultimately, it may sound great to the Latinos and kind of like not so great to blacks, because we are this first in line for the pickings, and now somebody else will be first in line. What that means for us, but for white America, it means what does it mean for them? And so a lot of people don't understand that a lot of shit that's going on now is reflective of how to diminish power. And I could easily see this nation going to another South African style thing, without us knowing that that's what's really going on, because it's about the laws that you have in place and what mechanism you have to retain those laws in place and not allowing them to be changed. And if they're in those political positions to set up laws so it's difficult or almost impossible for you to change, no matter how comfortable we are with our Constitution, they won't be changed. I mean, we have to also understand that our Constitution was built, constructed by men who held slaves, and they were talking about the freedom of all. So let's be clear, it's possible. And people think that it's not possible because, we know it all, we got fast communication and all that shit. It means nothing when you have the power,
So the view of race relations in 1999 compared to the view of race relations in 1979 is actually more pessimistic?
Not necessarily pessimistic, but more difficult to identify, and thus less a priority for people who may think they're doing something about it, or may feel that they're doing something about it, and may be doing something about it, but in terms of its effect, it may not be as impacting because of the subtleties of it. It's very easy to identify something that's in your face, but when it's behind the scene and when it's smiling to you and when it's got money out there for you, you don't see it as easily, and therefore you're less likely to be wary of it or to build a wall or to fashion barriers that will keep it from affecting you or impacting you in some significant ways. And when that is a part of the national, not just your own, but the national community, then that makes it even more powerful and even more difficult to counteract. Because everybody else is saying that it's better, it's greater, and it's working, and it's really not. Maybe for them, and maybe for segments of them. Look at how many black Americans they can get today, and even people of color, let me put it more generally, who can speak to how wonderful things are in the community. And it's about the fact that these people just simply do not work hard enough, or don't have the intellect, or don't care enough about doing, or not religious enough, or not godly enough to do it. And we know what that means. We know what that happens when they do that. We know what it signifies for what's really going on in society. And that's happening more and more. They can get, if you get a Jesse Jackson or a Al Chapman to speak about an issue, you can also get a black man to speak on the other side of that same issue, and they do it all the time to negate and to make it powerful that, oh, they saying that, but it's not real. This is what really real. Even in racial profiling, the governor want to play it down. Our governor of New Jersey, and the other thing about her is she will not allow, even though she got this committee to look at the issue of needle exchange, and it's not needle exchange, it's harm reduction, and that's what people have to understand. We're talking about harm reduction, where you give exchange of needle for someone, but you also talk with them about sexual behavior. You talk with them